Okay, I think we're there. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, my wild darlings, in whatever part of the world you may happen to be. I am Tad. I am situated mid state in California, only 5 minutes from the beautiful Pacific Ocean, in my underground bunker. Actually, no, it's just the downstairs, but I like to think of it as my underground bunker because, of course, my dream my entire life has been to have a volcano lair of my very own with neoprene clad minions and all that goes with being a Bond villain of the type that Michael Myers satire parodied so nicely in the Austin Powers movies. But long before that, that was a dream of mine. I always wanted one of those supervillain lairs. Or even better, like Doctor Doom would be my own Eastern European country where I could rule as monarch and basically force everybody to do my will. Now, my will is not the normal authoritarian will, of course. It would have to do with people remembering to occasionally bring me cookies, reading lots of books, having active conversations on the street about all kinds of things, including favorite birds, stuff like that. But in lieu of my volcano lair in the shape of a skull on an island in the mid Atlantic or mid Pacific, I make do with my office such as it is. You can't tell because in this particular picture it looks even more messy than it has been lately in the background, but that's in part because there's a mattress on the floor there, which is actually going to be on the daybed when the daybed shows up, because I'm in the process of finally dealing with the office. But right now there's a blanket piled on it so that, oops, wrong direction, so that a cat can be comfortable, which of course is all that really matters in this world, is that all of the cats are maximally comfortable. There's another cat around here somewhere, but I don't know where he is, hiding out. Anyway, so hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whichever it might be for you. I have a brief announcement in a moment, but before I do that, I just want to thank you all for the grace of being able to take last week off. We had a sudden issue to deal with, nothing personally painful or difficult or whatever for any of us here, but somebody who is dear to us had to deal with it, and we wanted to be there for them. So I'll leave it with that sufficiently vague explanation. But just to say thank you, I don't miss doing readings lightly. But sometimes that's just the only way it can happen, especially because of the odd timing of my weekend readings. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to mention now, my friend and cohort and occasional co-conspirator, Ilva, sent me a thing that she suggested that I should mention on the podcast, and I'll try to mention it again at the end of the podcast. This is specifically for those of you who are in Germany or who speak German. And it's about a particular podcast, which is two women, one of whom apparently knows my work. I believe her name is Kaya, and another woman, and who is reading it all for the first time. And I'll just read you this section of Ilva's email. It says, you might also give the podcast a shout out during the Euro reading, that's tonight, to generate more attention, which it well deserves. It is called Zum Grünengelturm, ein Buch-Podcast aus Ostenart, and is available on all podcast platforms. So again, it's Zum Grünengelturm, ein Buch-Podcast aus Ostenart. And then Tad Williams in parentheses, which I'm not going to try and say in even a bad German accent. So that's the podcast that Ilva wanted me to mention, and it does sound like a worthy, for me anyway, and for lovers of my work, which God thank God there are some. Um, Sounded like it was worth mentioning. I'll try to remember to mention it again at the end of the broadcast for those who weren't on at the beginning. Okay, so what else is there to cover? I have actually, not that it matters because I don't think I'd ever formally announced the publication date for The Splintered Sun, but for a variety of reasons, and just before this last weekend's complications all arrived, I had just pushed it back another half year or so because of it's still going to be 2026, but I think it's going to be more likely now to be winter of 2026 instead of spring. I apologize for the delay for those of you out there who are actually waiting. But I was not satisfied with my world building in particular and realized I needed to spend a lot of time just doing that. Because even though it's set in Osten-Ard, it's set a few hundred years earlier, and it's set of what the other books have been, most of the other books, and it is also set in Hernistir. And I realized there were big holes in a lot of my history of Hernistir that had been worked out during the course of writing the other books. And because this, among other things, concerns the King Teftain, who was one of the six kings of the Hayholt, the only Hernistiri king of the Hayholt, among others. At least he's a character in it. He actually appears in The Splintered Sun. I wanted to deepen and refamiliarize myself and invent. No, we don't invent. Discover some new history of Hernistir, and I wasn't feeling like I had had enough of that to be satisfied, and I felt it would be kind of a thin broth, as it were, whereas what I like are big, chunky, soupy stories that are deep and thick, and like that, and have lots of, as my friends in the Minnesota fantasy writing community used to call them, chewy bits, lots of chewy bits. So that's what's going on. I'm still working on The Splintered Sun. In fact, I'm working on it all the time. But at the moment, I'm working on some of the background stuff, which I felt needed to be dealt with before I finished the book and had it published. So that's going on. What else? I mentioned beginning to do some stuff on The Office. I had ordered a daybed, which kind of becomes that's what we call it in America. It's basically a couch that you can sleep on, which is like absolutely describes my working practices to a T. And I knew ever since I returned to this house that I was going to need one down here, and I finally found. I believe me, it's not that easy. I mean, for one thing, every single daybed I looked at was either white, gray, or black, and I was just I mean, first of all, this entire room is white. I don't need any more white furniture in here. And black, that's so 80s. And gray. So anyway, I finally found one I was more satisfied with. And then not only ordered that, but ordered a mattress to fit on it, the one that's lying on the floor behind me right now, covered with a rustic blanket to keep the cats from destroying it completely. And so the mattress arrived, and the mattress cover arrived, and then I got a message from the people that I ordered it from saying, sorry, we've had to cancel your order, we're sold out. Which would not be that huge a deal, except that I'd already bought a mattress, and believe me, not all twin mattresses that fit on daybeds are the same size, and I didn't really... So I had to go back and find another daybed from another place that had the same size of mattress. That's how stupid this was. But anyway, these things happen. It's just, just life. Just life. But that's what the kind of thing that and 70 zillion other crazy ass things that I've been dealing with. And that's life. Like I said, I'm sure all of you have been doing the same. Anyway, what else is there? Anything else to talk about at the moment? Dogs are still in détente. They're in detente. Johnny largely, big dog Johnny, senior dog Johnny, largely stays outside now, which is okay because it's California. And I have, since all of this started, I got him a dog house, which he seems very fond of. and another pad also that can go outside the doghouse so he can sit in the sun. And I'm just for the moment just kind of figuring as we go. New dog Lemon is a total loon, but she's very, very sweet. And she's very much interested in Johnny, but her interest in the past has led to her getting up in his face until he finally gets upset and then they fight. So we're still working on both of them, but we've had no major setbacks, so that's good. Let me think. Anything else that I wanted to mention? Nah, just, taking care of cats and dogs and ourselves and the people that we care about. And that's what we're doing here. As I've mentioned in the past, I will keep this a non-political show, but there have been some of the things going on the world stage and the national stage lately that have led me to posting on my regular Facebook page, where you may be watching this. I don't know, or you may be watching it later on at YouTube, which has been handled by the wonderful Chris Fobb, who is always helpful. And maybe eventually where I take these broadcasts, because I'm getting more and more pissed off at Facebook for a number of reasons, which I won't detail right now, but it's more politics and stuff. So anyway, but I will let everybody know well ahead of time and how that will work if we decide to do that. As always, I'm trying to avoid any unnecessary work, and I totally despise the fact that the world keeps inserting itself into my reality and forcing me to do things I'd rather not be doing so I could spend time on other things, like writing books, like training dogs, like petting cats, crazy, wild, out of control kinds of things that, just wild dreams of doing things that do not concern, adjusting insurance or spending an hour and a half on the phone with a supposed live human being to get my problems with my TV or my credit cards or whatever solved. Anyway, I'm going to check in and see who has said hello, if anybody has at this point. Let me think. Where did they go? Where did that go? All right, hang on. Let me look at the other one and see if it's visible there. Oh, I see. Okay, no, I'm still on the wrong tab. I didn't change that back. That's my fault. Okay. So, all right, who has showed up so far? There is Isaac checking in. And hello, Isaac. There is Sandra checking in from Vienna. Hello, Sandra. And Roja Langenhoff. Hello, hello. Checking in from the Netherlands. I have no idea because I haven't seen that name before. It's a very cool name, Roja. Rohaa. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Feel free to correct me. Nicole, hello, good morning, and happy Easter to you too. Nicole and family or friends are on an extended egg hunt. Excellent. Good to hear it. Nikki, hello. Good morning. And Nikki's checking in from Leicestershire. Suzanne asks, what is your favorite bird, Tad? Oh, it is almost certainly ravens or crows. I'm a big corvid fan. Not that I don't like parrots and several others, but just the sheer intelligence of ravens, crows, magpies, that delights me and fascinates me. I'm also rather fond of, odd and unusual birds too, like shoebills and bowerbirds and things like that. And I don't know, we have a lot of birds around here. And of course, we live surrounded by trees, so that's not surprising. But the rest of the birds, other than the jays, who are, again, also corvids, are mostly kind of small, unassuming birds. Oh, owls. I'm very fond of owls, and we have owls here as well. Anyway, okay, so that's my basic opinion on birds that I particularly like. I like all kinds of birds. We have hawks here, too, but the problem with me and hawks is that for years, of course, we had like a 3-pound chihuahua, and I was always worried that the hawks who live in the trees around our yard might just one day swoop down and take Walter. Well, Walter finally went, but in a natural way. So I guess nobody's taken no hawks are taking either of our 2 dogs, unless they're hawks the size of a Cessna or or even a private jet. It'd have to be pretty darn big because both of my dogs are pretty chunky now. Anyway, who else is here? Nikki, hello. That's Nikki Chetwind. Oh, did I already said? Oh no, I already said hi to Nikki. Sorry, Nikki. Well, not sorry for saying hi twice. That was Suzanne asking about the favorite bird. There's Kristen. Hello, Kristen. Good to see you as always. Iris checking in, who also says Happy Easter to those who celebrate. Isaac is in northern Utah, over 100,000 years from Lake Bonneville. Wouter, hello, hello. Talking until Bond escapes should be no problem for me. That's so very true, except that I have learned the lessons of many of those other villains. Remember, I grew up on comic books, and that is, of course, the classic comic book thing. Not just movies, but comic books, where the villains decide to monologue until the good guy manages to get his shackles off or somehow telepathically summon help, or send a spray of web fluid into the computer's intake valves, whatever. Anyway, so yes, I'm very familiar. And Wouter also says, and a happy Easter to all. Christy says, good Easter from the Sunrise side of Michigan. Who else? There's Jeremy. Hello, Jeremy. Good to see you. Winter. Hello, hello. Happy Easter to you too. Roja, yes, zum Grünen Engelturm. So, to Green Angel Tower in German is the name of that podcast. Who else is here? Olaf, my good friend Olaf. Lovely to see you. Olaf has even posted. Olaf has even posted, that's because I was looking at the word podcast, has even posted the podcast in the comments section, so you can go directly to the URL there. Who else? Isaac says story chowder, question mark. Suzanne Owen says, what about a chaise longue? Surely they're back in fashion after Wet Leg song. I love Wet Leg, by the way. I think they're so cool. They're like from Jersey or Guernsey or one of those places. I can't remember, but one of those British islands that used to belong to France or something like that. Anyway, but they're very cool. I've actually thought about, one of the things that I was thinking about ordering here was basically a kind of chaise longue. And who knows, I may still add one. You never can tell. Anyway, Mark offers an owl. Voucher suggests that one could argue a hawk is also a natural way to go. Natural in the larger sense of how things work, I guess. There's Chenoa saying, hey all. Isle of Wight, says Suzanne. Okay, good. Thank you for the clarification on that. I remember they were from one of the British islands, but I couldn't remember which one. All right, super. So, with that all said, I am going to start reading because we are now getting to the part where the stuff starts to go, although not immediately. I don't think tonight we're going to have any metaphorical explosions, but we'll see. Anyway, so what had happened last is Bobby had shown up at the Ralston Hotel. He'd had a brief conversation with Sam, his friend, who was also there. He met Prince Citri, who is a high-ranking demon who may or may not have some involvement with the case, and managed to alienate himself as far as his rapport with Citri. But then later on in the evening, one of Citri's bodyguards showed up at Bobby's hotel room door and handed him a note from the prince, saying essentially, come downstairs to the lobby and you will learn something that you need to know, or something like that. And Bobby has gone down to the lobby and discovered Kaz, which is the Countess of Cold Hands, Casimira, his lover, who he's been obsessing about for days and days and has had no reply from. So anyway, that's where I'm going to start, and he's found her at the bar. The look on her face seemed close to panic. Bobby, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? What are you doing here? I suddenly felt conspicuous, but if anyone in the bar was watching us, they were being cagey about it. Why didn't you call me back? Now that I stood in front of her, I was more than a little angry, but that was only part of the storm that was blowing my emotions this way and that. For those who don't know anything else, let me just tell you, it's really weird to live in a human body. You can feel the hormones pumping, feel the hide bristling, skin stretching and shrinking. Feel yourself being tugged by fight or flight impulses like the animal that you are, or were. I wanted to grab her, kiss her, drag her to my room, but just as powerfully I wanted to shake her until tears came to those robin's egg blue eyes. Make her feel how much I was hurting. Yet another part of me was terrified that one of Eligor's minions would spot her, and I'd have to decide between some kind of fatal standoff or else stand helplessly and watch them drag her back to the beast she had cheated, a creature that I already knew did not take losing well. "You can't be here, Bobby." She grabbed her drink and downed it and began fumbling in her purse for money to leave on the bar. "He'll kill you." "Who? Eligor?" I was confused. Why was she worried about me instead of herself? Everything seemed to have gone topsy-turvy. "No, this is a summit conference. There's an official truce. I've been ordered to be here, and the place is packed with angels. I'm in no danger at all." Okay, not completely true, but I had bigger worries at the moment. Just seeing her again had me terrified that something might happen to her. Even if she lied to me, tricked me, even if she didn't care about me at all. "You're the one who shouldn't be here, Kaz. Your ex owns this whole fucking hotel." I was startled by something that flickered across her face. Something like shame. "Wait," I said. "You knew that already. You must have. Kaz, what are you doing here?" "Oh, Bobby." But she was looking over my shoulder now, and the shame was replaced by something else entirely. "Well, well, well," said a voice I knew. It lifted the hairs on my neck, which were just starting to relax, right back up again. "Two of the most interesting people I know." I spun. The Grand Duke was only a couple of yards away, leaning on the bar, dressed in his Kenneth Wald best, a linen suit and expensive moccasins that made him look like a rich colonial, which, in a sense, he was. Eligor wasn't from here, but he definitely owned a lot of it. I wasn't in any condition to play his game. I didn't reply, but I didn't reach for my gun either. Once I found out he owned the place, I had decided there was a good chance I would bump into him. I had just hoped it would be somewhere I felt safer, like when I was sitting next to General Hard-Ass Corral, scourge of all hellspawn. "Oh, sorry, am I interrupting?" The horseman was the very soul of graciousness, that blonde lord of hell, cheerful and charming. Now the people in the bar were definitely watching. Eligor swung a lot of weight, and not just in San Judas. "Oh, that's right, I forgot. You two already know each other." His smile was cold and clean as a surgical blade. "I'm not surprised. You're both very enterprising." He turned to Kaz, whose face had gone dead as a doll's. "But I'm afraid I really do have to interrupt. We have a meeting, Countess. People are waiting for us." He didn't beckon or even raise his hand, but she rose from her bar stool and went to stand beside him, obedient as a dog. I met her eyes again, but there was nothing there for me, her expression so empty that I began to wonder if everything else I had seen on her face tonight and those other more intimate times had just been more of her masks. "A pleasure to see you, Mr. Dollar, even briefly," Eligor said. "I hope you're enjoying your stay." "It's a very nice hotel." I was determined not to spend the entire conversation in stunned silence. "But honestly, Val, some of the people you let in here..." Again the smile, meaningless as the grin on a great white shark. But the duty of a host is to find a way to accommodate every guest. That's why I'm so happy to have the Countess back. She is very good at finding what people need and giving it to them. He started to turn, then paused. Please don't let me rush you off, Mr. Dollar. The lady and I have to go, but I hope you'll stay and have a drink on me. He looked up, made eye contact with the bartender. I'm sure you have lots of old friends who'd love to find you here and catch up on old times. He walked away then, graceful and self-assured as a cat, with Kaz at his side. I half thought she might turn to look back at me, but of course she didn't. I sort of collapsed onto the stool Kaz had occupied because at the moment I didn't trust my legs to carry me across the room. I had been shot in the heart without anybody even pointing a gun at me. The bartender came to take an order, but after the eye contact between him and his boss, I couldn't imagine letting him pour me anything, so I shook my head. I felt like someone was waving a big magnet around near my internal compass. I suddenly didn't know where to go next, what to do. Why was Kaz here? Why had she gone back to him? And why had Citri wanted to send me down here, unless it was just to provoke his rival, the Grand Duke? Kaz had told me she'd stolen the feather, and that Grasswax had done something with it, so why would Eligor take her back? Did she have it all along and now had used it to buy her way back into safety? Or was the truth something worse? Had I been played like a sucker from the start? A heavy hand fell on my shoulder. Fancy meeting you here, said another voice I recognized and wished I didn't. Just the thought of having to go through something like this now made me so tired I almost didn't answer, but I forced myself to turn and face the unibrow and the nasty little eyes beneath it. Howling Fell, I said. It's so nice to see you that I'm even going to say please when I tell you to take your hand off me. He smirked and stepped back. He was wearing a shiny new suit that made him look every inch the jumped-up punk he was. That didn't mean he couldn't kill me, of course. I know lots of people who are killed by punks. In fact, punks with a grudge are probably the most dangerous type to deal with. Give me a crazy-ass, violent drunk any day. You look a little depressed, Dollar, he said. Found out your girlfriend went back to the guy with the power and the money, huh? Isn't that too bad? Howley, do me a favor and fuck off, will you? I stood. I don't need you, and since we're under truce, I can't do anything useful to you. So why don't you go back to pissing around the edge of your tiny little territory and leave everything else to the grown-ups? His lip twitched back. He was in a mortal body, of course, but he still looked like his first impulse was to go for my throat with his teeth. You think you're something special, Dollar, but you're not. You just dog shit to someone like Eligor. And that's your job, huh? Cleaning up the shit? Nice resume builder. He stared at me. His eyes, which had at first looked brown, now caught the light and gleamed, deep red like a Sangiovese Grosso. You wait, you little snot, he said, just quietly enough to make sure everyone in the bar was trying to hear. As soon as this conference ends, you're mine. I'm gonna eat your liver. And even your fancy girlfriend will forget you. She probably already has. It took every bit of self-control I had not to shove my fist right into his bushy-browed face. Glad to hear you're getting serious about your diet, Howley. But there's no organ meat in the world with enough vitamins to wipe away all that ugly. I thought he might jump me as I walked off, and I almost wouldn't have minded. There's a certain therapeutic value in getting bloody, as long as you make sure the other guy gets bloodier. But all Howling Fell did was let out a snarling breath that sounded like a lion imagining the day the keeper would forget to lock the cage door. By the time I got back to my room, my phone was vibrating. All I really wanted to do was find out what would happen if I mixed all the little bottles left in the minibar together and downed the results. But out of long habit, I dragged it out of my pocket to check the number, then answered. George, what's up? I'd almost forgotten I'd called Fatback. After seeing Kaz, I barely cared. Well, my fees for one thing, if you keep leaving me these hurry, need it now messages. George, my friend, after Porky and the one in Lord of the Flies, you are the funniest pig ever. I'm calling because you said you needed help. He sounded hurt. Why is it that every time I feel like I've been gut shot by life, everybody else suddenly decides to get sensitive? Sorry. Rough evening. Thanks for calling back. Find anything yet? I'm sending you specs on the Ralston. Yeah, it's another Vault credit property. At least there are plenty of fire escapes. That's good, because right about now I wouldn't mind burning the place down. I flicked through the files just to make sure they'd all arrived. Schematics, emergency information that looked like it had been lifted straight out of the San Judas FD main server. All kinds of goodies. Seriously, great work, George. That's just what I needed. You're welcome, Mr. D. He sounded cheerful again. Anytime. Sometimes George seemed almost pathetically grateful for any kindness. I guess when you spend your entire thinking life in the body of a majestic, large, black boar hog, you're going to have a bit of an inferiority complex. But even though Fatback was a good guy, I didn't want to be talking to him or anyone just then. I wanted to be drinking myself unconscious. Anything else? I prompted him. About Leo, maybe? Nothing other than what you already know, Bobby. There was a big stink at the time in your circles when he died, if you know what I mean. Lots of scuttlebutt, loose talk, folks who thought he'd been bumped off for asking too many questions or knowing things he wasn't supposed to know. But I can't find anything new. Oh, but speaking of dead guys, I could almost hear the minibar calling to me. Oblivion, Deloriel, sweet oblivion. But I did my best to pretend patience. Yeah, that Habari guy you asked about? The one with the what's-it-called society? I immediately became more focused. Magians, yeah? What do you mean, speaking of dead guys? Did he turn up in a morgue or something? In a manner of speaking, but not recently. Stop confusing me, George. I'm fucking exhausted. To his credit, Fatback didn't sound offended this time. Well, it's not the same guy, obviously, but how many times do you run across a name like that? And a reverend, too? Just tell me. I found a guy who had the same name, first, middle, and last. And he was even a reverend, but he died 7 years ago, almost 8. And he didn't have anything to do with any Magian society. He gave me the details, which upset me considerably, because if I was going to figure out what all this new stuff meant, I'd have to put off the drinking binge that had seemed like the only thing alluring enough to keep me alive until tomorrow. I thanked him again and then called Clarence the Boy Angel. Although by my standards it wasn't particularly late, I obviously woke the kid up. I wondered if the little company spy had gone to bed in his footy pajamas with his nice landlady reading him stories or something. Bobby, he groaned, what time is it? Too late for you to be awake, obviously, so I'll make it short. If Sam was right, I couldn't trust him an inch, so I paused to figure out how best to phrase my question. Look, when we went upstairs and I had you look up all those names, did you only check the rolls of the living or whatever they call that stuff at records? Do you mean did I check dead people? He sounded a little more awake now and cranky. Of course I did. I told you I couldn't find anybody by any of those names except that one guy, Jose Petrillo. who was the ringer I put in to test him. So, Habari was dead, but he wasn't in heaven's records? What in the name of the highest was going on around here? But just before I hung up, I thought of another question. How far back did you look? You mean how long in the past? To see if any of them had died? Yeah. He snorted. Well, considering you told me that you just seen the guy in the flesh, I only went back a little way. I think I checked the deaths for the last couple of years in case he'd passed fairly recently but had been misfiled. So Fatback's information was probably right, and the kid might even be telling the truth. About this, anyway. No matter what, though, things were getting very deep now, very deep indeed. So you only went back maybe 2 years? If I told you somebody with that same name had died 7 years ago right here in San Judas, that wouldn't surprise you? Somebody dies every few seconds, and lots of people share names, Bobby. It sounded like he was getting impatient with me. It made an interesting contrast. No, that wouldn't surprise me very much at all. Okay. Thanks, kid. I almost asked him why our bosses had set him to snoop on me, but I also knew it was a bad idea to show him my hand. Never give up anything for free. Go back to bed. You sound like shit, Bobby. He actually sounded concerned, an actor to the end. I think you're the one who needs to get some rest. Oh yeah, as soon as I can find some quarters for the vibrating bed. But I knew now that despite having to meet the scary soldier angel for breakfast at 8 o'clock sharp, not an hour of the day I particularly enjoy even at the best of times, I wasn't going to get a lot of sleep because there was too damn much to think about. The world I'd thought I knew was proving to be an even more dubious proposition than I'd figured, and I'd always thought of myself as a cynic. Plus, just to make my happiness complete, after breakfast I was going to be interrogated by the biggest powers on both sides of our permanent war. A great chance to make new enemies. I locked the minibar to force temptation to work harder, since I could no longer afford to get slaughterously drunk. The sound of that key turning in its tiny little lock seemed like one of the saddest sounds I'd ever heard. Chapter 33. The Odor of Violent Subtext. 7 minutes after 8 in the morning is not my favorite time of day, and adding lukewarm scrambled eggs and the hard face of Cariel, only a cup of coffee and a grapefruit away, didn't do much to improve it. Sit up, Angel Deloreal. This restaurant is full of creatures who spend their entire miserable existence looking for any sign of weakness on our side, and you're slouching like a school child who forgot to bring in his homework. My problem was that I had brought my homework to the summit conference, and it had kept me up half the night. The alternative had been to spend the wee hours of the morning cursing fate and wondering what Kaz was doing back with her ex, a monster who didn't even have Hitler's fondness for dogs. But I couldn't tell that to the general, of course, so I just nodded. Sorry, up late, working. This is your work, Angel Deloreal. In a little over 20 minutes, you're going to be in there with the big boys. And so far, I'm underwhelmed by your effort. His mouth tightened into a very thin line. There's egg on your lapel. I brushed it off and did my best to transfer the rest of it from plate to mouth more carefully, as Cariel explained again, for the third time since I'd stepped out of the elevator, what I was supposed to say and not say. The report you sent about this third way nonsense does not officially exist, Advocate, he explained again. It's being held back until after the conference is over. We don't want to start something before we know all the facts. But why are we having a summit then? I noticed that thinning line again and wiped my mouth with my napkin. Isn't the third way exactly the sort of thing that should be discussed with the opposition? The line quirked up on one end.
You think so? That this is all about getting to the truth? Son, if we always let actual truth turn into official truth, this Cold War of ours would have turned hot a long time ago. You remember Sodom and Gomorrah? Or at least heard of them? Well, just change the names to Rio or Berlin or Shanghai. Imagine those burned to the ground tomorrow with millions of casualties, just for starters, and you'll have some idea of why you are going to do what you are told. 10 minutes later, I was marched into the Ralstons' Elysium Ballroom, sometimes known as the Cloud Room, because of the billowing cloudy sky painted across the high ceiling. Packing his demon cohorts and angelic enemies into such a room must have amused Grand Duke Eligor to no end, and it was packed. A few hundred were grouped around the various tables, although most of their chairs had already been turned for a better view of the stage, where the main business would take place, at a long table set with microphones. Other than Curiel, beside me, the main movers for both sides were already in place. Eremiel, our heavenly expert on hell, whose raw-boned face and longish hair gave him the look of a 19th century abolitionist preacher, very much in tune with the Gilded Age setting. The third of the important angels had to be Phanuel, the famous angel of exorcism, but by the standards of the Elysium Ballroom, he was not very interesting to look at, just another Hollywood male lead in a sober suit. As expected, the opposition was visually a bit more interesting. Once you could stop staring at the jellied mass of Prince Citri, you noticed Adramelech, one of the old bad ones, who had done less than the rest to pass as human. From a distance, he looked okay, just an old man in a black suit with a skin color that suggested lots of sun lamp time. Only when you got a little closer could you see that what covered his face looked less like skin and more like a mask of sandstone, yellow and granular. The only things that moved in that stony mask were the eyes, black and liquid as tar. Just seeing the stillness with which he waited for things to start made it clear how big this all was. Adramelech scared me badly. The last of the satanic negotiators was also the most ordinary looking, dressed in a sharp bespoke suit and wearing a pair of black-rimmed hipster glasses like an industry lawyer. This was Kame, another heavy hitter, president of the main council of hell, and one of the smartest in the opposition's stable. What interested me, though, was that according to Fatback's grapevine, he was also Eligor's mouthpiece, pushing the Grand Duke's agenda in the deadly arena of infernal politics. I decided I needed to keep a close eye on him for clues to what Eligor had in mind. Many others were on the stage with them, the great and good, or nasty and bad, of both sides. Terentia and Chamuel, both part of the Ephorate that had grilled me in heaven, were there in human form, as were many other angels and demons I didn't immediately recognize. "Don't gawk," Curiel said sharply into my ear. "I'm going up there now. There's a seat for you in the second row with your name on it. Sit there, keep your mouth shut, and remember everything I told you." As the angel militant climbed the steps to the stage, his back straight as the shortest distance between 2 points, I found the chair marked $, and slipped into it. Like a wedding between the Hatfields and McCoys, the audience had been seated by affiliation, and I was happier than I'd been in a while to be surrounded by fellow employees of the highest. With Curiel in place, the conference finally lurched into life. Adramelech, acting as chairman because we were on the opposition's home ground, gave the opening remarks, a blur of verbiage that managed to be both dryly politic and yet clearly menacing, with several comments about temporarily putting aside our very real differences to address the mutual problem. Eremiel spoke for our side and managed to be succinct and even occasionally funny, as when he referred to the chairman as the, quote, Honorable Adramelech, which must be the first time those words have been spoken together. Even a couple of hellspawn grinned at that. And, of course, before they could depose anybody, there were more speeches, about an hour and a half's worth. It seemed like everybody who'd ever been fitted for a halo or issued a pitchfork had to have their say. The delegates from hell seemed to range along a continuum, from the noisily nasty ones, who were like professional bigots, complaining about how it was their side that was misunderstood and stigmatized, to your basic Politburo thugs, the sort of bureaucrats who signed orders for torture and execution and then paused for a catered lunch before going back to work. Their basic stance on the entire heaven-hell conflict was, lies, lies, all lies. We will bury you someday. My side had its own version of this kind of crap, of course, but the range was more like militant Christian war hawks at one extreme and gray little European bureaucrats at the other. Either way, by the time the preliminaries ended, a whole lot of nothing had been said, but the massive ballroom stank with the odor of violent subtext. The only thing that had been made definitively clear was that neither side was taking the blame for the missing souls. Then the parade of witnesses began. I tried to stay focused. You never knew when some little slip would turn out to be important, but with the pride of their hosting privileges, the other guys went first and called up a numbing stream of minor infernal bureaucrats to explain all the ways they had noticed something amiss, without in any way conceding that they might have made an error, and without giving away anything substantial about hell's internal procedures. In short, a snore fest. No doubt following the official party line, most of hell's deponents hinted darkly that only the highest, who liked to make his own rules, could pull off such a thing. The only one that really caught my attention was a scrawny underdevil who, even in human form, looked like he'd lose an arm wrestling match to olive oil. He said that some nameless archdemonic supervisor had assured him that the souls must be hidden in some heavenly safe house right here on Earth, like high-value defectors, because other than upstairs or downstairs, there was nowhere else to go. The Tartarian Convention specifically states that no new territory can be opened without the consent of both heaven and hell, he said piously, and such a thing has never happened. I looked it up. While a few of the audience on the other side of the ballroom chuckled at this wet-behind-the-horn simpleton, I sat forward in my chair. What are you doing over there? Psst. Stop. Sorry, that was a cat. While a few of the audience on the other side of the ballroom chuckled at this wet-behind-the-horn simpleton, I sat forward in my chair. A puzzle piece that had been sitting prominently to the side of my unfinished mental jigsaw, a piece labeled Why the Feather, suddenly seemed to have found its place. I snuck a look up at Eligor, who sat at the back of the stage with other infernal dignitaries, but his calm smirk was unchanged. Nevertheless, his friend came, quickly ended the skinny demon's testimony, and sent him back to sit with his cat-calling comrades. I wondered if Eligor was even now imagining how that gawky, excessively talkative underling would look as demonic macrame, a la the late Grasswax. Soon it was Heaven's turn to bore everyone in the room to death, although Sam's testimony provided a few entertaining moments when he followed a bunch of Heaven's least forthcoming pencil pushers into the witness chair. Adramelech seemed interested in hearing what he had to say, but Caim just looked focused and blank, while Prince Sitri, who had barely spoken, continued his imitation of the world's largest melted candle. You were the first of your cohorts to receive the summons to the death scene of Edward Walker, were you not? Adramelech asked Sam. I certainly was, Sam drawled. Why didn't you obey? Other than my documented allergy to work? Sam paused to let the quiet laugh die away on both sides. Because I was busy training a new recruit, and he was very eager to learn the ropes. He nodded as if remembering a sunny day on the river when the fish were biting. Yes, sir, these young fellas are much more aggressive and impatient than we were. Wild young guys. I'd hate to be in the opposition's shoes when they get the reins in their hands. He broke off as if he'd said too much, but his grin said, We're having fun now, huh? Adramelech was not intimidated and certainly not amused. His wet black eyes were like puddles of tar on a beach. Stick to the questions, little angel. His voice was as dry as thirst itself. Did you answer the summons? Sam smiled. You know that I didn't, Senator. Adramelech was famously the president of the great Senate of Demons, so this was a bit of a swipe, but the stony face didn't show even the tiniest crack. Then we need hear no more from this honorable gentleman, said Kame, blinking and pushing his glasses back up his nose. It's almost noon, and we have many more witnesses to depose, unless his honor objects. Adramelech made a noise of contained disgust and shook his head. Sam gave me a little thumbs up as he passed me on his way out of the ballroom. I half wished he would have stayed, just so I could have seen at least one friendly face. They broke for lunch, but I didn't feel like eating. I went back to my room to see if it had been searched. It had, of course, and then got a soft drink from the machine before returning to the ballroom. The atmosphere seemed to have become even more tense, frustration setting in as both sides realized nothing was going to be accomplished and nothing was going to be said that everyone didn't already know. Shortly after the proceedings resumed, I got my call to the stage. As I climbed the stairs, I thought I was being stared at a little more intently than I had expected, and not just from the opposition side of the room. I couldn't help wondering whether that heavenly bastard or bastards who had set Clarence on me might be watching me even now in this very room. No matter where some handicappers may rank me, I'm not the dumbest guy ever to wear a halo. I did exactly what Kariel had told me, answering the questions as truthfully as I could while staying resolutely clear of anything controversial. At least I did until Prince Citri sideswiped me with a surprise inquiry. His soggy, wheezing voice made me want to clean each of the words thoroughly before I allowed them into my brain. Isn't it true that you have been following up on the case since the disappearance of Edward Walker, Mr. Dollar? That you have been investigating the various unusual acquaintances of Mr. Walker's? Kariel, bless him, bristled and half rose from his chair. What our people do and what our internal policies are in an unprecedented case like this are none of your business. One of Citri's eyebrows rose like a caterpillar climbing a glob of suet. Pardon me, but aren't missing souls all of our business? Is that not the reason we are gathered here in this lovely hotel? Surely only someone with something to hide would object to my questions. I could see dozens of laptops and phones around the room suddenly being assaulted by 10 times that many fingers, in most cases, as heavenly and infernal bureaucrats took note of this interesting little contretemps. The flurry of typing and texting brought home to me the strangeness of the whole conference in a way nothing else had. All these creatures of light and darkness, immortal and immensely powerful, with abilities humans could only guess at. And yet, by mutual consent, they were meeting here on Earth, where they had to make do with the stumbling artifacts of mortal technology to do their jobs. It was like the UN deliberately holding their deliberations by candlelight in Dark Ages France. In Kame, Kariel had an unexpected ally in trying to cut off this line of inquiry. The bespoke demon suggested that perhaps a rules committee meeting should be convened to decide on whether Citri's question was permissible under the agreed format. Many in the audience groaned at this time-wasting idea, but a few demanded it be implemented. A couple of spectators cried, "Cover up!" from the infernal side of the room. The argument became general and rather shouty. Adramelech, perhaps because he was also playing Eligor's game, or maybe just because he was 1,000,000 years old and needed to piss, finally slammed his gavel hard against the tabletop and rasped for silence. In the ensuing hush, he turned from side to side, stiff as a tortoise who had just woken from hibernation, then said, "We do not have time to do this today. We have only today for all the witnesses. These points can be resolved before the deliberative phase tomorrow, time permitting," which effectively closed off Prince Citri's question and anything like it. I saw no disappointment in the glittering eyes that peeped out of the prince's drooping facial flesh, and I wondered if the whole thing had just been Citri's way of poking at his rival Eligor, like the little confrontation he had arranged between Kaz, me, and the horseman in the hotel bar the night before. I answered a few more procedural questions and was interested to note that nobody on either side seemed willing to bring up the strange coincidence of grass wax getting snuffed at the same site only a few hours later. In fact, the whole subject of what really happened around the Walker disappearance seemed to be surrounded with an invisible fence, like the kind people used to keep wayward dogs in the yard. But how did they get all those demons and angels fitted with shock collars? How could a supposed inquiry work so hard not to inquire? How high did this third way thing go? And did it reach that high on both sides? After I was released from the stage, a number of other angels were interviewed about the souls who had disappeared after Edward Walker, but none of it gave me anything to work with, or pushed the discussion forward much at all. Already any pretense of fact-finding had disappeared into partisan bickering. If you think watching Congress make laws is unappealing, you should see the sausage factory of the eternal powers at work. Gosh, you would think they didn't like each other or something. 5 o'clock was approaching. I was hungry and depressed, two things that don't usually go together for me, and I was just contemplating sneaking out as soon as Kariah looked away for a moment when Adramelech abruptly gavelled the whole thing to a close. "We will resume tomorrow morning," he said, his words like wind over dry hills. "I suggest that all participants consider ways to make our next session more productive. I am not impressed with our progress today, nor does it make me hopeful of any real joint solution to our problem." He walked from the stage as slowly as a tin toy overdue for a winding. Kame followed him, while Citri waited patiently for the hydraulic lifter that would move him into his cushioned golf cart. The prince's pudgy fingers were tented on his chest, and to my untrained eye he looked rather pleased with his day's work, which as far as I could tell seemed to have consisted of nothing more useful than taunting Eligor with hints about the Magian Society. Should I try to question Citri again? I wasn't kidding myself he would do me any favors, but I wondered how deep his rivalry with Eligor went. Enough that he might throw me a bone, if only to help bury the Grand Duke? But he was rolling toward the freight elevator, and I didn't have the strength of will to chase him right now. I checked in. We're going to go about a minute or two past the top of the hour. I checked in with Sam, but the ache of my buddy's injuries hadn't been improved by a long day in a ballroom chair. He was going to take a nap, but promised to catch up with me later, so I went upstairs and called in a room service strike on my position, then took my coat and tie and shoes off. I'm not a suit person by nature, as you've probably guessed. When forced to wear one, I always have to fight the urge to find a jagged rock and rub it off me like an itchy old snakeskin. I've always found hanging out for long stretches in a hotel room a strangely mixed experience. The sense of otherness never goes away. The knowledge that you're not in your own place, although the anonymity of the situation is appealing. It's like being the last undiscovered guy in a game of hide and seek. You just settle into being on your own, and if it lasts long enough, you even stop thinking about anyone looking for you. That is, until someone finds you. I had been mindlessly flipping channels for so long that the sky beyond the room's flimsy muslin curtains had gone from pale blue to black, and the baseball games and primetime dramas were winding down. In fact, I was winding down too after my long night and early start, my eyes starting to droop when someone knocked on the door. I'd called Sam an hour earlier, and he'd said he was taking Advil and staying in bed, so the chances were good my late visitor was someone I didn't want to see. In this situation, that meant someone I might have to shoot. My dwindling supplies of adrenaline were enough to get me off the bed quickly and over to my coat and shoulder holster. I still had the extended magazine on the 5.7 automatic. I wanted it loose and in my hand from the start, so it wouldn't snag on anything. So I hid it behind my back as I cracked the door, stepping back in case somebody strong was planning to kick it hard enough to break the chain. My heart was beating fast, and I was ready for anything. My heart was beating fast, and I was ready for anything hell might send. Well, almost anything. "Let me in," Kaz said in a cold, flat voice. "This hotel is crawling with busybodies and spies. You can call me a whore when I'm inside and the door's locked." She came in with her head up, looking defiant, ready to be slapped or cursed. I closed and locked the door and put the chain on, wondering just for a moment if I might have dozed off, if this could all be some kind of dream. She stared at me, waiting for me to do whatever I was going to do next, and to be honest, at that exact moment, I didn't really know. The less angelic parts of me ended that confusion by grabbing her shoulders and pulling her toward me. Then I used my mouth to silence the question she started to ask and dragged her down onto the bed. At first she seemed to be struggling, but it was only to get her clothes off. I didn't even bother with most of mine. We rolled, grabbed, scratched at each other. She was weeping and cursing as I entered her. I might have been doing the same. And that is the end of the chapter. And next we will be reading tomorrow night, chapter 34, Breathing Together. But for now, we are done for the night. So with that, I thank you for joining me. It is always a great pleasure to spend time with you. I will be back at 7 p.m. later today to continue with the story. And as I said, from now on, things begin to kind of take off. So we will just zoom on through. We got about somewhere between 15-20% of the book left, but it's all pretty fast from here on. That was the long, boring section, as all meetings are, especially those kinds of big corporate affairs. Anyway, so again, thank you for joining me. A pleasure to see you. Be good to yourself. That's the first and most important part, because if you're not good to yourself, you can't do anything. Be good to yourself. Be good to your loved ones and friends, those close to you. Keep an eye out for those you may not know so well, but who may need a little help. Pay attention to your civic responsibilities. I know it's not always fun, but if we don't take care of the world we live in, we won't have a world to live in. I will see you very soon. Some of you I will see in just a few hours. Peace and be well.